Hey, third graders. We are ready for part 3, Conquest. And in here, there are some magical fruit trees that are very unlike what we were reading in Mystery Science. So it's kind of fun. I love this fantasy book. Chapter 1 of part 3. The professor and the children discovered that the other side of the mountain descended into a series of gentle rolling hills. Streams and waterfalls poured forth, splashing, leaping, and gurgling down the slopes to join the golden river. The grass was lush and thick and of sparkling aquamarine blue. Ben noticed a mass of plum-colored trees in the distance. Hey, what are they? I'm not sure. But if my sense of direction is right, said the professor, this forest is of the tree squeaks. I would say that right now we are in the heart of Whangdoodle land. The wiffle bird flew around them and landed in a tree. She fluffed out her feathers beautifully. Easy does it, she said. The professor looked around. Let's take the wiffle bird's advice. This seems like a good place to rest for a while. There's lots of shade, and I don't think we're going to be spotted here. You know I'm hungry, said Lindy. I haven't had anything to eat for ages. Yeah, I'm starved, said Tom. The professor reached into the low branches of the strange-looking tree. That's easily put, all right, he said. Lindy bit into this fruit that looked like resembled a large maroon pineapple. Lindy bit into it. It's fabulous. What kind of tree is this? It's the fruit of the month tree, replied the professor. You mean each month it grows a different kind of fruit? Asked Tom. My first trip to Whangdoodle land, the trees were growing tangerangos. A few months ago, it was passionanas. The professor plucked one for himself and took a bite. This month it's raz apple. Have some. It'll be good for you. They ate their fill of the delicious fruit, then relaxed on the shade of the tree. The professor said, You know, I've been thinking, it might be wise to stay here for a night. It's getting dark, and it's getting difficult to find our way back. The children loved the idea of camping out in Whangdoodle land. The boys rolled up their jackets and used them for pillows. Lindy covered herself with the cape and rested her head on the professor's. They watched a pale, translucent moon rise in the emerald green sky, where brilliant stars sparkled overhead. The Whangdoodles' palace gleamed in the night like a huge chandelier. Lindy said wistfully, I wish we were up there looking down here instead of the other way around. So do I, Lindy. Oh, so do I. The professor's voice was full of longing. Ben pushed himself up on elbow. Professor, how close have you been to seeing the Whangdoodle? I mean, before you met us. The professor reflected for a moment. I only came close enough to know that he was there, Ben. Of course I talked to the Procolot, and I met your good friend the wiffle bird. He looked at her perched in the tree close to Tom. She appeared to be fast asleep, although it was hard to tell. I never really got much beyond the Gambit region, he continued. I discovered that it wasn't possible for me to reach the Whangdoodle land by myself. I needed youthful minds to help me. That's why I was so thrilled when you came to my door at Halloween, for I had almost given up hope. It was kind of a miracle, wasn't it, said Lindy. Well, I'd call it more of an opportunity, said the professor. Miracles, contrary to popular belief, do not just happen. A miracle is the achievement of the impossible, and it is only when we put aside our greed, anger, pride, and prejudice so that our minds are open and ready to accept it. That's when a miracle can occur. The Whangdoodle managed to think and do the right things and look for the miracle he brought about for himself and his friends. He surely must have tried hard, said Tom. Do you suppose we will ever get to meet him? If you want to badly enough, the chances are that it will happen. Actually, I've been thinking about doing something. Since we've come here this far, how would you feel about making one last all-out attempt to reach Whangdoodle land? If we are careful and lucky, we might reach the palace before the Proc has any idea that we are in the vicinity. What do you know about the Whangdoodle? Will they even let us reach the palace? I don't know, but I have a feeling the closer we're able to get, the more regard he will have for our determination. Let's do it, said Tom. Please, Professor, let's give it one more try. Lindy was nearly asleep, but she managed to murmur, please, please. The professor smiled and opened his plastic umbrella with his yellow butterflies. I guess it's settled then. Tomorrow we'll make an early start. I suggest we get some rest now. And he pushed the umbrella handle into the soft earth and made a perfect shelter from the gentle night breeze that was blowing across the hills. He stroked Lindy's hair and talked quietly in the darkness about the stars and the constellations. He told them about the furry little creatures called flukes and how the Whangdoodle first left the human world they had hidden away in a pair of his old slippers. When they were finally discovered, it was too late to send them back. Lulled by the soft voice, the children pulled their scrappy caps down over their eyes and fell asleep into a comfortable deep sleep. The professor woke up early. It was barely light and the sun had yet to be shone. Pockets of mist lay among the vivid blue hills. He said quietly, "It is imperative that we get through the forest of the tree squeaks before they wake up. If they see us, they'll warn Proc. Let's go. Keep very quiet." He led the way down the hill and the wiffle bird flew onto Tom's shoulder. "Professor," whispered Ben, "what's that road just over there?" The professor nodded. "Probably the main highway. What a bit of luck." The sky was beginning to redden. The professor quickened his pace. They reached the road and discovered that it was made of shell-pink flowers clustered so tightly together that they were like a carpet. A signpost stood on the grassy bank. One arm pointed at the trees and read, "To the forest of the tree squeaks." Another arm below pointed to the same direction and it read, "To the palace." "Not long now," the professor murmured happily. "Let's take off our shoes. We'll make less noise." The road was cool and springy beneath their feet. Tom noticed some white star-shaped blossoms growing in the hedge with the huge berries hanging beneath them. He tugged the professor's sleeve and asked if he could eat some. The professor picked a berry and tasted it. "Delicious," he pronounced. "Shut your mouth," muttered the wiffle bird. "Why did she say that?" asked Lindy. "She's saying we really must be quiet." "Yes, but does she have to be so rude about it?" Lindy asked. By the time they reached the entrance to the forest, everyone had eaten a scrumptious breakfast. Their first impression of the forest was that it was dark and gloomy, but as their eyes adjusted to the light, they saw that it was unusually colorful. The plum-colored trees had brown, gnarled trunks. Most of them were embraced by a vivid pink ivy growing and twining around the tall columns and twisted limbs. Garlands of honey-cream flowers hung from the branches linking one tree to another. The floor was mossy and bedded with ferns the color of amethyst. Huge pearl white and crimson orchids grew on the side of the road, which pointed straight as an arrow to the dark interior. Then they saw the eyes. There were thousands of them, large, unblinking, tortoise-like shell, yellow orbs staring around the leaves from every part of the forest. It was such a chilling sight that the professor and the children came to complete halt. Gradually, they were able to discern the bodies of the tree squeaks, which were hanging upside down on their tails from every tree. They were like little russet-colored monkeys with wings folded on their sides. Lindy took the professor's hand. "Are you awake or asleep?" she whispered. "Asleep, I think. They have strange characteristics of being able to sleep with their eyes open. Come on." They moved forward again, clutching their shoes in their hands. The forest was full of soft, rustling sounds and occasional tiny squeak. The professor and Lindy led the way, with Ben and Tom and the wiffle bird bringing up the rear. Suddenly, Ben startled everyone by giving a clear, loud hiccough. He dropped his shoes and clapped a hand across his mouth. The professor spun around. Ben's eyes were wide with horror. His shoulders heaved as he hiccuped again. The wiffle bird nervously fluffed out her feathers. "Shut your mouth," she mumbled. "Shh," hissed the professor. Everyone looked up at the tree squeaks. They had not moved. The professor picked up Ben's shoes and and motioned to the children to follow him. They had gone a few more paces when Lindsay had made a high, squeaky sound like a mouse with a bad attack of the sneezes. She looked panic-stricken and started to apologize, but all that came out was another squeaking hic. "Oh, hic, up, Professor, up, hut." They could not stop. The professor hurriedly pulled his big spotted handkerchief. Lindy grabbed it and promptly dropped one of her shoes. Everyone tried to do something at once. Lindy stuffed the handkerchief into her mouth. Ben bent down to pick up Lindy's shoe, still keeping one hand across his mouth. The professor caught his umbrella handle in his pocket, and Tom suddenly gave such a loud hit that the surprised wiffle bird took off. The professor dived for her and caught her just as she was flying past him. His umbrella and the shoes scattered in all directions. "Dear wiffle bird, please don't make a sound." By now, all three children were coughing violently. The professor signaled for everyone to stand still. He stroked the wiffle bird and looked up at the tree squeaks. In spite of their noise, they remained undisturbed. "I'm going to tie your shoes together so that you can hang them around your necks," he whispered. "That will leave your hands free so you can cover up your mouths." He gathered up the shoes and gave a pair to each child. "Now then, we will start again. Follow me, and please try to be quiet," at which point he gave the loudest hiccough the children had ever heard. The professor looked so startled that it was all he could do to keep from laughing. The professor lifted up the collar of his jacket and pulled the coat above his head. Muffled sounds came from beneath it as he struggled to stem the attack. The children waited, twitching and shaking, trying desperately to rid themselves of their own fearful spasms. Presently, the professor emerged from beneath his coat, his face beet red. He gasped, "We should never have those berries. Take a deep breath and hold on as long as you can." The children did as they were told, and then when they thought their lungs were about to burst, they carefully exhaled. To their surprise, the hiccoughs seemed to have gone. They all looked at each other. Everything was silent again. Not a sound, not a single peep came from any of them. They smiled with relief. "All right, everybody okay now?" "Right, okay, let's get out of here." They moved off. Without warning, each one of them let forth an explosive, unguarded hic at exactly the same moment. The noise was so loud that it seemed to split the forest wide open. The result was disastrous. Every tree squeak rose up in the air, squealing, squawking, and screeching, and the entire place rang and throbbed with a terrible sound. Lindy screamed. Tom covered his ears. The wiffle bird cried, "Mayday!" And the professor grumbled, "Fiddlesticks! Fiddlesticks!" Ben watched the black cloud of the tree squawks swirling above him. To his amazement, he realized they were screaming, "People! People! People! People!" as loud as they could. The Proc and every other creature in the land could not fail to hear such a warning. The wiffle bird's voice cut through the frightfulness. "Cheer up," she quacked. "Well, that's a stupid thing to say," shouted Ben angrily. The professor hugged Lindy close because she was sobbing in fright. "Cheer up. Up, cheer. That's it. Let's cheer. Let's drown out the noise. I refuse to be intimidated by this racket." "That is very intimidating," asked Lindy. "Oh, never mind, darling. Just sing. Sing as loud as you can. All of you. Remember when we went to our picnic and sang in the rain? Sing louder than that." The professor started to sing Rousing March. The children joined in, stopping and banging their shoes together to make such noise that the wiffle bird, not quite excited, and flew around shrieking ferociously, "Shoot the works!" The terrible clamor above them diminished, and their hiccoughs grew less as the professor, waving his umbrella like a baton, led the way through the forest. Quite suddenly, they emerged from the trees and into the daylight. The morning sun was so bright that it took a moment or two to get used to it. They continued singing until they were all well away from the forest. The sound of the tree squeak subsided and gradually faded away altogether. The professor sank into the grass. "My great godfathers," he said with a feeling. "I have never been such a frightful experience. Those miserable tree squeaks and those ghastly hiccoughs." He clasped a hand to his stomach. "Was it the berries that made us hiccough?" asked Tom. "Of course. That's what Whifflebird was going to tell us about when we were eating. When she said, 'Shut your mouth,' she meant, 'Don't eat.'" Ben stroked the Whifflebird's beautiful feathers. "You always know the right thing to tell us, don't you, Whifflebird?" The Whifflebird made her humming sound and strutted around proudly. The professor said, "I really must pay more attention to her. That's the second time I have missed the sense of what she was saying, and both times we got into trouble. There's a lesson in that, young man. Learn to listen well when people are talking. First, it's a great art. And second, it's quite possible that when people say one thing, they mean another." He rubbed his forehead wearily and looked at the children. "You know, we haven't had a hope now of reaching that palace without trouble of some kind. I'm quite sure that Proc heard the tree squeaks and is already making plans to stop us." "But we are going on, aren't we?" asked Ben. "I'd like to, that is, if you all agree. We're really so close," said the professor. "I'd say it's the Proc or us," Tom declared. "How do you feel about it, Lindy?" "Oh, I feel fine," she said in a small voice. "I wish we could stop being surprised all the time." The professor nodded understandingly and looked around. The region was very different from anything that they had seen before. A white desert with cherry red cactus plants growing out of the sandy ground. There were small foothills in the immediate area, and beyond them, the giant mountains and the Whangdoodles palace. The professor got to his feet. "Well, if we're going to continue, we'd best be on our way." He strode off at a good pace, and the children followed. See you tomorrow.